It was one of those London mornings that tricks you into thinking the city is actually a gentle place. You know the kind. The rain had stopped around 7, leaving everything slick and polished like someone had wiped a cloth over the whole city. The sky was that pale, watery blue you only get in April, and the trees along the mall were just starting to cough out their first green leaves. I wasn't supposed to be there. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I was only in London because my connecting flight to Edinburgh got cancelled. Budget airline. Typical. So I had a day to kill, and I thought, when in Rome, or, when near Buckingham Palace. I grabbed a sad croissant from a Pret-a-Manger and walked from Green Park Station, following the crowd like a sheep. By 10:45 a.m., I was pressed against the railings outside the palace gates. The gold tips of the fences gleamed like they'd been polished that morning. There were about 200 of us, maybe more. Tourists with selfie sticks. A school group from somewhere in Germany. I heard a teacher counting heads. An old couple holding hands, the wife wearing a Union Jack sweater so aggressively red it hurt my eyes. The atmosphere was that specific kind of patient boredom. People were checking phones, retying shoelaces, complaining about the price of the hot chocolate they'd bought from a cart. A little girl was sitting on her father's shoulders, waving a tiny flag. Standard stuff. I remember the sound the most. The wet squeak of sneakers on stone. A bus engine rumbling somewhere behind the mall. And then, underneath it all, the low, constant hum of a city that doesn't care about your schedule. I found a spot near the front, because I'm that annoying person who elbows their way forward. Sorry. Not sorry. My legs were tired from sleeping in an airport chair. I leaned on the cold railing and just watched. The palace itself looked like a wedding cake. Too grand to be real. The flags were limp on top. No wind. Everything felt suspended, waiting. And then, the sound came. Not music. Something deeper. A vibration you feel in your ribs before you hear it with your ears. Thump. 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 The crowd shifted. Phones went up. A wave of ooze and, there they are, rippled back through the pack. The changing of the guard wasn't just a ceremony. It was a slow, deliberate, breathing machine. The band was at the front, all brass and drums, their uniforms so dark blue they looked black. And, behind them, the guards themselves. Those famous red tunics. Those towering, fuzzy black hats that looked like they were stolen from a sleeping polar bear. They moved like a single creature. Left foot. Right foot. Left foot. Right foot. The crunch of their boots on the wet gravel was hypnotic. I've seen videos online, but it's different in person. It's heavy. Serious. These weren't actors. These were soldiers. The new guard marched into the forecourt. The old guard stood frozen by their sentry boxes. The captain shouted something, a name, a command. I couldn't catch it. The band struck up a tune I almost recognized. Something classical. Something that sounded like victory and sadness mixed together. I scanned the faces of the guards. That's what you do, right? Try to see if they blink. Try to see if they're human. Most of them looked like wax figures. Perfect. Unmoving. Chins up. Eyes fixed on a point 1,000 miles away. Except one. He was positioned near the center left of the formation, not quite a sentry yet, maybe a replacement. The first thing I noticed was that he was tall. Not just tall for a guard. Tall for a human. He towered over the man next to him by at least 3 inches. The second thing I noticed was his jaw. It was set hard, but there was a tiny muscle twitching in his cheek. Like he was chewing on something sour. I almost looked away. I almost pulled out my phone to check my flight status. I almost missed everything. But then, the little girl on her father's shoulders dropped her flag. It wasn't dramatic. The plastic stick clattered on the wet ground. The father bent to pick it up. The girl started to cry, that thin, reedy sound kids make when they're more surprised than hurt. And that's when the tall guard broke. He didn't move his feet. He didn't turn his head. But his eyes. His eyes slid to the left. Just for a second. Just a flicker. He looked directly at the crying girl. And his expression softened. Not a smile. Not a nod. But something human passed over his face. A flicker of recognition. A memory. I saw it. I was the only one looking right at him at that exact moment. And, in that flicker, something cold touched the back of my neck. Not the weather. Instinct. I knew that face. Not from a photo. Not from a passing glance. I knew the shape of his cheekbones. I knew the way his left eyebrow sat slightly lower than his right. I knew him. But that was impossible. Because the last time I saw that face, he was wearing a grey hoodie and eating a kebab at 3 a.m. on a street corner in Manchester, 10 years ago. The band played on. The guards marched. The crowd clapped. And I just stood there, my blood turning to ice water, holding a half-eaten croissant, watching a ghost in a royal uniform. Part 2, the crack in the statue let me rewind. Because you need to understand why my brain short-circuited. 10 years ago, I was a second-year university student. I shared a flat in Fallowfield, Manchester, with 3 other guys. One of them was a lad named Danny. Danny wasn't his real name. Nobody knew his real name. He showed up one day, answered an ad for a room, paid 3 months' rent in crumpled notes, and never talked about where he came from. Danny was trouble. But the good kind of trouble. The kind that makes you laugh so hard you spit out your drink. He had this way of making everything feel like a movie. We'd be sitting in a shitty living room with a stained couch and a broken radiator, and he'd tell a story about a man he saw on the bus, and suddenly, you were there. You could see the man's hat. You could smell his cologne. He worked night shifts at a warehouse. Or so he said. Sometimes he'd come home at dawn with bruised knuckles and a wild look in his eyes. Boxing, he'd say. Just sparring. We didn't ask questions. That was the unspoken rule of the flat. Don't ask Danny where he's from. Don't ask Danny about his family. Don't ask Danny why he flinches when a car backfires. He was funny. He was loyal. He once walked 6 miles in the rain to bring me cold medicine when I had the flu. He'd leave little drawings on the fridge, cartoons of us, exaggerated and cruel, but so accurate it hurt. And then, one night, he vanished. No note. No text. His room was empty. Not a trace. Even the weird smell he left behind, cigarettes and cheap cologne, was gone by morning. The landlord said his name wasn't on any paperwork. The police shrugged. Probably just moved on, they said. I spent a month looking for him. Checked hospitals. Checked morgues. Nothing. I told myself he was dead. It was easier that way. So when I saw that face, under that bearskin hat, standing at attention outside Buckingham Palace, I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. But the twitch in his jaw. That was Danny. Danny used to do that when he was holding back a laugh he knew he shouldn't laugh. The ceremony ended. The old guard marched away. The new guards took their positions, frozen like statues. The crowd dispersed, chattering and clicking photos. The German school group left. The old couple shuffled toward the park. The little girl got a new flag from a vendor. I stayed. I stood there for maybe 20 minutes, just staring at the tall guard. He was now stationed at the far left sentry box, near the gate. Tourists walked past him, close enough to touch his sleeve, and he didn't move. A man in a business suit stopped to take a selfie. The guard's eyes stared straight through the lens. Through the man. Through the entire city. But I knew. I walked closer. Not close enough to get tackled by the actual police officer standing nearby, but close enough to see the sweat on his temple. It was warm under that hat. I'd read that somewhere. The hats are made of real bear fur. They weigh like 7 pounds. In April sun, it must be torture. I stood about 10 feet away. I didn't call his name. I didn't wave. I just waited. And, after a long minute, something happened. He blinked. Not a normal blink. A slow, deliberate blink. Like he was resetting something inside himself. And, when his eyes opened again, they moved. Just a fraction of an inch. Just enough to find my face. He didn't react. His expression didn't change. His body didn't move. But, his eyes saw me. I know they did. Because behind the glass of that soldier's stare, I saw a door open and, close, a flash of something that looked like fear. Or recognition. Or both. Then, his eyes snapped back to the horizon. The mask was back. A tourist bumped into my shoulder. "Sorry, mate," he muttered, not looking back. I didn't move. My mind was racing. Danny. A royal guard. How? Why? The guy I saw eat a kebab so sloppily he had to wipe his hands on his jeans. The guy who couldn't hold a job for more than 2 months. The guy who told me once, drunk, that he'd never been in a building with a doorman in his entire life. And now he was standing sentry for the king. Something wasn't right. I decided I wasn't leaving until I got answers. Part 3, the worst possible moment. The crowd thinned out over the next hour. By noon, there were only a few dozen stragglers. A Japanese couple taking photos from every angle. A woman sketching the palace gates in a leather notebook. A homeless man asleep on a bench, wrapped in a sleeping bag that smelled like rain. I found a bench near the Canada Gate. Far enough to not be suspicious. Close enough to watch. Danny, if it was Danny, didn't move. Not once. No scratching. No shifting weight. No wiping sweat. He was a man turned to stone. I watched him for so long I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was just a guy who looked like him. People look alike. The brain plays tricks. Fatigue, stress, the weirdness of travel. But, then, I saw it again. The twitch in his jaw. No. It was him. I was trying to figure out my next move when the atmosphere changed. You know how it feels when a storm is coming? The pressure drops. The air gets heavy. The birds go quiet. It was like that. The tourists started looking up. Pointing. Murmuring. A black car. Not a limo. Something smaller. More discreet. A Range Rover, dark-tinted windows, moving slowly along the road that runs past the palace. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't racing. But, there was something urgent about it. Something heavy. 2 police outriders on motorcycles flanked it. No sirens. Just silent, serious movement. "Who is that?" someone whispered. "Probably a diplomat," someone else said. But, I saw the flag. A small one, on the hood. I didn't recognize it. Not the Union Jack. Something else. Red, yellow, red. Horizontal stripes. The car pulled up to a side gate. Not the main entrance. A smaller, private gate I hadn't noticed before. 2 men in dark suits got out first. They scanned the crowd like predators. One of them looked directly at me for a second too long. I looked away. Then, the back door opened. A woman stepped out. Mid-40s. Sharp cheekbones. Dark hair pulled back tight. She wore a navy dress and low heels. No jewelry. No fuss. But, she moved like someone who had never been told to wait in her entire life. She was talking on a phone. Fast. Angry. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel the heat from 50 yards away. She walked toward the private gate. The suits flanked her. A palace official in a morning coat met her, bowing slightly. She waved her hand, "Don't bow, just walk," and they disappeared inside. The whole thing lasted maybe 90 seconds. The crowd went back to their photos. The Japanese couple shrugged. The woman sketching didn't even look up. But I was looking at Danny. And Danny was looking at the gate. His head hadn't turned. His body hadn't moved. But his eyes had shifted. They were fixed on the spot where the woman had disappeared. And, for the first time, the mask cracked. His face went pale. Not a little pale. White. The color drained from his cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. His lips parted slightly. His breathing changed. I could see his chest rising and falling faster under the red tunic. He knew her. And he was terrified. I didn't know who she was. But I knew fear when I saw it. I'd seen it on Danny's face once before, 10 years ago, when a car backfired outside our flat and he hit the floor like he'd been shot. This was worse. Because he couldn't move. He couldn't run. He was trapped inside that uniform, inside that ceremony, inside that identity he had built for himself. And the worst possible person had just walked into his world. I stood up from the bench. I didn't know what I was going to do. Walk over? Shout. Something. Anything. But before I could take a step, the private gate opened again. The woman came back out. Faster this time. Her phone was gone. Her face was different. Not angry anymore. Something else. Something colder. She walked straight to the Range Rover, but then she stopped. She turned. And she looked directly at the guard formation. Directly at Danny. She didn't wave. Didn't call out. She just stared. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Long enough for one of the suits to touch her elbow, murmuring something. She shook her head. Got in the car. The door closed. The convoy pulled away. And Danny stood there, frozen, a man whose entire life had just collapsed in silence. Part 4, The Fall of the Mask. For the next 30 minutes, nothing happened. Or everything happened. Depends on how you look at it. The guard changed again. Not the full ceremony. Just a routine rotation. 2 new guards marched out, 2 old guards marched in. Danny remained at his post. He was supposed to be relieved. I saw the schedule. I'd been watching long enough to guess the pattern. But something was off. The relief guard hesitated. A senior officer whispered something. They left Danny there. He stood alone. The sun went behind a cloud. The temperature dropped. The crowd had thinned to almost nothing. Just me, a few die-hard tourists, and a man walking his dog on the far side of the road. And then, Danny did something that made my stomach clench. He moved. Not a lot. Just his right hand. It twitched at his side, like he was reaching for something that wasn't there. A phone. A weapon. A door handle. Something to hold on to. His eyes were still fixed forward, but they weren't seeing the palace anymore. They were seeing something else. Somewhere else. A flat in Manchester. A gray hoodie. A kebab at 3 in the morning. He was remembering who he used to be. And that's when the worst possible moment arrived. Not with a bang. With a whisper. A man appeared from the palace side. Not a tourist. Not a guard. He was in civilian clothes, dark trousers, a pressed shirt, no tie. Mid-50s. Gray hair. The kind of face you'd forget immediately. But he walked with the confidence of someone who had every key to every door. He approached Danny directly. Not slowly. Not cautiously. Directly. Like he had every right. I was close enough now to see their faces. I'd moved to within 20 feet, pretending to look at my phone. The gray-haired man stopped in front of Danny. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Just looked at him. Studied him. Then, he spoke. Quiet. Almost friendly. But, I heard it. The wind had shifted. They know, Daniel. Danny's eyes flickered. Just once. The tiniest crack in the statue. The gray-haired man smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. The woman in the car. She recognized you. She's been looking for you for 10 years. And, now she knows exactly where you are. I felt the air leave my lungs. She's been looking for you. Who was she? His mother? His wife? His enemy? Danny didn't answer. He couldn't. A guard doesn't speak on duty. But, his hands. Oh God, his hands. They were shaking. Just a little. The kind of shake you can't control. The kind that comes from deep inside, from a place where all the old fears live. The gray-haired man leaned closer. You have 30 minutes to decide. You can walk away. Quietly. Disappear again. Or you can stay, and we'll handle it. But, if you stay, Daniel, you belong to us now. Completely. No more hiding. No more running. You're not a ghost anymore. You're a soldier. And, soldiers don't get to choose their battles. He stepped back. Adjusted his cuff. And, walked away without looking back. The silence after he left was louder than any sound I've ever heard. Danny stood there. The mask was gone. Not shattered. Just, gone. His face was raw. Naked. A man stripped of every lie he'd ever told. I saw tears in his eyes. He didn't let them fall. But, they were there. I swear they were there. And, in that moment, I understood something terrible. Danny wasn't running from the law. He wasn't a criminal. He was running from someone. Someone who knew him. Someone who had power over him. Someone who had finally found him, not in a back alley or a train station, but in the most public, most watched, most permanent place in the country. His identity wasn't just revealed. It was captured. Part 5, The Long Walk. I don't know how long I stood there. 10 minutes. Maybe 15. Danny didn't move. The other guards didn't look at him. The tourists took their photos. The world went on like nothing had happened. But, something had changed. The air was different. The light was different. The palace looked less like a wedding cake and more like a cage. Finally, a senior officer walked out. A tall man with a red plume on his hat. He stopped in front of Danny. They exchanged words I couldn't hear. The officer's face was unreadable. Professional. But, there was something in the way he held himself. Respect. Or maybe pity. Danny nodded once. And, then, he did something I will never forget. He turned his head. Slowly. Deliberately. And, he looked directly at me. Not through me. Not past me. At me. His eyes met mine. And, for one heartbeat, one single, eternal heartbeat, he recognized me too. His lips didn't move. His body didn't shift. But, his eyes said everything. You saw me. You remember. Don't forget. Then, he looked away. He straightened his back. He lifted his chin. And, he marched. Not toward the palace. Not toward the guardroom. Toward the private gate. The one the woman had used. He walked like a man going to his own execution. But, he didn't run. He didn't hesitate. He just went. The gate closed behind him. The lock clicked. And he was gone. I stood there for a long time after that. The Japanese couple left. The woman with the sketchbook finished her drawing and walked away. The homeless man woke up, cursed at the sky, and shuffled off toward the park. I was alone. The palace glowed in the afternoon light. The guards on duty were new faces. Immaculate. Unreadable. No one would ever know what happened that morning. No one would ever write a news story about the tall guard with the twitching jaw. No one would ever know that a man named Danny, a ghost from a flat in Manchester, had stood in that spot, holding together the pieces of a life that was never really his. Except me. I think about him sometimes. When I'm stuck in traffic. When I can't sleep. When I see a man in a uniform and wonder what he's running from. I never told anyone this story. Until now. Because here's the thing about identities. You think they're yours. You think you can choose them. You think you can put one on like a red tunic and a bearskin hat and become someone new. But the past doesn't care about your uniform. And the worst possible moment is never the one you plan for. It's the one where you look up, and someone is already looking back.